Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dandia. This week's episode, I welcome Terry Stroud. Terry and I recently connected in our Master's in Counselling Psychology course and exchanged many thoughtful reflections and ideas regarding family systems therapy. Terry is a mature student who has worked with teens in the past, and then he became an electrician. While being an electrician, he was often called a psych counselor by those from the other trades. And now he is excited to become a psychologist and counsel people of all ages. He's passionate about the LGBTQ plus community, mental health, and doing a touch of crocheting in his free time. Having suffered from a functional neurological disorder, or FND, his life has been reshaped into a desire to help people see just how powerful the mind and brain can be on our entire bodies. In this episode, Terry and I talk about his journey through the functional neurological disorder, how he dealt with it, and what he learned from it. Terry talks about his mindset and what has helped him through this experience in life. Terry also shares how this entire experience impacted his wife and kids. We also talked about Terry having some realizations regarding intergenerational trauma and how he has applied what he recently learned in our course together. You can find Terry on Mastodon under Terry J. Stroud, and please leave a review at the end of this episode. Thank you. Right, Terry, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time. For listeners, it's Christmas Eve when we're recording, so I'm very grateful that Terry's willing to do this today with everything going on. So welcome. And before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Yeah, totally. My name's Terry. I'm a master's student at Yorkville University, doing a master's of arts in counseling psychology, moving into my practicum pretty quick here. Originally from Newfoundland, Canada, even though I don't have a super thick accent, but comes out once in a while. And yeah, married guy with 2 kids, several careers in my past. Becoming a therapist, but was an electrician and was actually a youth pastor for a few years there as well. So I've kind of got a very winding journey,
Yeah,
and over the last few years, which is kind of what's connected us here. So
correct. Yeah. So for listeners, Terry and I are in the same program. We were doing the same course. I believe it was your last course as well, the couples and families.
mhm.
Yeah, so we connected through there, and for me, I was really inspired by Terry's story. So I guess kind of getting into that, like what motivated you to go into counseling psychology and want to become a therapist?
So I'd always wanted to do it. When I was going to college, I took some counseling and psychology courses. Um, Absolutely loved it. Was super into it. And even before that, actually, I'd read lots of counseling books and those kinds of things. Um, it was always a major interest of mine. And in working with teens and with families, did a lot of informal counseling with them. And that really, I don't know, it always really resonated with me. So anyway, things didn't work out within that career, moved on to be an electrician. And the ongoing joke was that I was the site counselor for whatever site I was on. So I'd have carpenters coming up and just like chatting with me about, relationship stuff. And, I'd have people that I work with, coworkers, just kind of talking about their life stuff, what's going on. And, people found it really easy to share with me. So, um, anyway, I was quite happy in electrical, was loving what I was doing, ended up getting sick and losing the use of the entire right side of my body. They thought it was MS, did some MRIs, and there were no lesions. So they're like, well, not MS. I don't know what's going on. saw one neurologist who completely dismissed me. And then finally saw another neurologist who was absolutely astounding. His name was Dr. Hussein. And he, did a bunch of different tests and stuff and said, I think I know what's going on. You have a functional neurological disorder.
Hmm.
And he's like, this can be caused by so many different things, but it, a lot of times it can be caused by stress, mismanaged mental health, which I'd always had some mental health issues and was getting help for, but
Hmm.
there were a lot more compounded issues, which is a whole other side thing. And so as I started working through that, I had to in doing therapy, in doing physiotherapy to try to get some of the strength back.
Yeah.
It was a long journey of several years, actually, trying to regain the use of my body. I was having like what they call functional seizures, where I'd black out for 40 minutes,
Hmm.
and it lowered down to like 20 minutes. So there was a lot of stuff going on. Neurologically, that was what they would consider to be functional. So they can't pinpoint the biological side. So all of this really affected my experience in being an electrician, because you can't really be bending pipe, pulling wire, any of that stuff when, you can't walk or lift or, do anything without conking out.
Yeah.
So that threw my career out the window. As I was recovering, we decided, hey, because I've always been interested in counseling, what if I looked at maybe trying to get a master's and look at becoming some kind of counselor? And so as I looked through different places and contacted some schools, Yorkville actually took me in with a lot of equivalency, as well as looking at some of my undergraduate courses that I had done, had several conversations, several interviews. And they said, like, yeah, given that, your references and everything, 100%, we actually think this is a really amazing fit for you.
Yeah.
And as I've been doing all the academics of the degree, it's like, yeah, this has been an astounding fit for me. So very winding journey with a whole medical side, and that's why I'm in the direction that I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And obviously there's a lot to unpack. And I guess for me, the first question I have is, like, how long did this last? How long were you dealing with this condition for? And when did it happen?
Oh, that's the fun question. Now I'm missing large chunks of memory, so
Yeah.
because of it happening. So I believe it started. I think it was 2000. Wishing this. I think it was 2018.
Yeah.
It started. Um, my last full blown symptom. um, Let's see. I got rid of my cane. I was in a wheelchair for quite some time.
Mhm.
I got rid of my cane in 2020, I think, the end of 2020. So actually, yeah, it was right before Christmas. So
Mhm.
it would have been 2 years ago that I
Wow.
got rid of my cane. Um, I, if I don't watch myself and I do get stressed, um, I get, I can start getting some of the numbness in my hand,
Yeah.
in my leg. I get because sort of the anxiety numbness around my lip, and I can start getting some of those things. So basically, the FND, the functional neurological disorder, will be with me forever as a possibility if I don't manage myself with good self care.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, I think it's been, um, I would say about a year. I would say year and a half ago was the last time I had like any kind of major symptom.
Right.
So that was yeah, like 3.5 years, 3 years of symptom.
Yeah. Yeah, and you were obviously married with children. How was that, like, whole experience for your family?
Well, that, I'll be blunt, it ruined our lives.
Mhm.
Um, it was absolutely terrifying. It was very traumatic,
Yeah.
especially actually for both of our kids. So we've been working through a lot of, um, they're a lot better now, but they've had, therapy and had been working through a lot of what genuinely would be trauma, because they thought I was dying.
Mm.
And, so like genuine DSM-5 textbook trauma, they were meeting some of that,
Yeah.
according to therapists. So, yeah, and my wife is still struggling with, sort of a lot of the aftermath of that because those experiences stick with you forever. And, we get this in our heads that, well, you talk it through and then you move on, but
Mhm.
they don't, it doesn't work that way. Um, those experiences don't go away. You learn how to manage that emotional residue that tends to be left over. So really, after all this time, we are still uh, working through a lot of the fallout from that experience because um, that was very terrifying. And hearing her story from when it happened, which I have little to no recollection of that first day,
Right.
um, is actually putting myself in her shoes. That would be terrifying beyond all reasoning.
Mhm.
Um, which we don't have to go into that whole day because that to me that's her story
Right.
to share. But yeah, it's been a rough thing. It's been step by step, day by day, and we're getting better and better as a family, and just kind of working through every hurdle one step at a time. But something that life changing and scary definitely hits your whole family hard. You can't
Yeah.
avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. And as you mentioned, for you, it's a bit of a blur. Obviously, there's that memory loss associated with it. But how has it been now that you've come out of it? Obviously, keeping in mind that it can come back if you're not managing your stress levels, but being there for your children and your wife, like, how are you managing that considering that you don't really have much of a memory associated with what happened? What how do you remind yourself to show up, and what do you do in those instances where that trauma is potentially triggered?
So for me, one of the biggest things I try to do is continually work um, on my own self awareness
Mhm.
of how I react in the moment. So, I mean, with my wife, I find it a lot easier where, she expresses something. It's like, okay, I'm going to be present. I'm going to be here. I'm going to listen. I'm going to support her in whatever it is she needs to talk through. And that's been a work in progress in our relationship because she is, it's funny. People always laugh that their joke is that, I'm the wife and she's the husband. Because of the two of us, I'm probably I'm the soft one.
Yeah.
I'm the one that's gonna cry at a movie, and she's like, "Yeah, let me just go play paintball and hurt someone." That's just who she is. She's rough and tumble. Um, but she's very emotionally reserved and um allowing her own space and time to kind of grieve and work that through. And now she's at a place where she's like, okay, if I share what I'm feeling with you, you're proving that you're not going to get stressed out and this isn't all going to happen again.
Mm.
Right. And that's kind of the main trauma point is the fear of going through that again.
Right.
And I, I have really worked hard to try to make sure that she has the space to do that on her own volition.
Right.
So I'll ask, like, are you okay? And if she's like, yeah, I'm fine. And I look at her, I'm like, okay, because I can tell like you're seeming tense. So
Mhm.
um, I can promise you this isn't going to um, bother me. This isn't going to set me off if you share. Remember, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
So, but no pressure either if you don't want to.
Yeah.
And leaving it open like that has been really helpful because I think um, earlier in our marriage, I would push and push and push and push because, like, gotta fix it, gotta
Yeah.
do something. I feel helpless, gotta do something, and that didn't work. She doesn't. You push her or tell her what to do, she's going to do the opposite. Plain and
Right.
simple. That's just who she is.
Yeah.
So, giving her that space, it's taken some time, but she'll now talk about, wow, this feels, well, this happened and this reminded me of what we went through. And now I'm just a little scared it's all going to happen again. And um, not having to give an answer. I don't have to give a response.
Hmm.
Um, say, yeah, that's scary from your side. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I'm not going to butter it up. Like, I'm not going to try to find a solution. I don't need to find a solution. It's just
Yeah.
kind of embracing where we are right now. What she's feeling right now has been the healthiest. And with my kids, um, that's been far more complicated.
Hmm.
My oldest is currently working through a prognosis of autism. So that changes a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
They both have ADHD. My oldest is severe. So, well, we're working through other elements to this as well. And with that, to try to be present for them while being their father, as right now, the stay at home dad.
Yeah.
Um, it's a balance for me and a struggle right now in trying to know, okay, when do I have to be emotionally available and listen? When do I need to draw the line? When do I need to be supportive? Um, so I don't have a good answer on the kid side of
Yeah.
things. I'm working that through day by day and being very willing to say I'm sorry because I do mess up and sometimes jump the gun and um, try to work that one through.
Yeah.
So hopefully that answers the
Yeah. Yeah.
question
No,
in
I
a
mean,
really long way.
no, I appreciate that. I mean, with kids, it's a constant learning curve, right? I mean, considering the situation, but at the same time, even under normal circumstances, and I mean normal, like whatever you want to call that, but it is a constant learning curve, right? We constantly make mistakes as parents because we don't know, we've never been through this process before, so it is a bit of a trial and error. And what I pick out from there is that having that humility as a father specifically is so crucial because it shows our parents that sorry, our children, that we do care and we're trying our best and we're willing to learn from the feedback they offer us. And I don't know if there's a better approach than that, right? At least based on my personal experience, there's not much else you can do in those moments when you're working with your children. It's giving them that space to express themselves and showing up as your true self. And even with your wife, as you mentioned, that there is an aspect of your attachment styles coming into play, and you giving her that safe space to express herself but not forcing it too much, because then that could trigger her, is so crucial. And we often forget that in relationships because we're so especially as men, we just want to fix things, and we get caught up in that. So I appreciate you kind of focusing on that and being aware of giving her that space. And seems to have improved things, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah, it's been a long journey of recovery. And we kind of accepted after the first year of when I was going through the FND that, okay, this is a very long journey we're going through. Um, so, whatever small things we can do to help us improve and help us stay together, which has been the core of our relationship since we were even dating, was, what do we need to do to stay firm together no matter what kind of storms are going on in life? So, throw that cliche out there. And so that's still our mindset. that regardless of what happens in our lives, um, we talk and find ways to stand firm together and prioritize
Mhm.
us. And it's still a work in progress. I would say it's better now than it ever has been.
Yeah.
Um, but it rocks things and it changes things. And the biggest mistake that I made was in so when I really started recovering, saying like, well, this isn't going to happen again.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, you can't promise that.
Yeah.
And she flat out called me out on it. And she's like, you can't promise that because there's no way you could have promised that it wouldn't have happened in the first place.
Right.
And I need you to not promise things that you can't control.
Mhm.
So it was actually helpful to say, I don't know if the possibility is there that this kind of thing could happen again. So let me show you what I'm doing to take care of myself to make sure. And a big part of that helping us kind of stay strong together has been me saying, well, um, I put in some boundaries recently
Yeah.
on some things, or I made this decision to put me first
Mhm.
because I've got to make sure that I don't have the same stuff happen again from not taking care of myself, my mental health properly.
Yeah.
So and letting her know, here's what I'm doing. Hey, I talked to this person, had a great heart to heart and, found that was really helpful
Mhm.
for me. So here's my action plan coming out of it that I'm going to do. And then saying like, hey, here's the thing I did that I said I was going to do. And, protecting myself, protecting my mental health, because as I protect my mental health, that means I protect myself physically. If
Mhm.
I protect myself physically, I'm also protecting uh, my whole family.
Right.
And so, in flip that around, she now is doing the same thing
Mhm.
because we don't want this kind of thing to ever happen again to any of us.
Right. Yeah, yeah, and that's such an important point you've made around prioritizing our well-being first because we often, especially when we become parents, we lose focus of that, right? And our main priority is to look after our children and then our spouse. And quite often, people even put their jobs before themselves. So, like, your own well-being and prioritizing that almost falls number like fifth or sixth in that list. And we lose sight of if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't really take care of other people. And, there's a bit of a shift happening now that more and more people are starting to recognize that. But going through that experience, like, and now where you are having to manage that stress, like, what are some things you're doing other than, like you said, mental health? Like, what are some things you're doing specifically to put yourself first and prioritize your well being?
Um, a big part is making sure that I'm spending time reading for recreation because I have a bad habit of reading stuff that is very mentally stimulating, which you'd think, "Hey, that's not a bad habit." No, it can be.
Yeah.
I uh, I tend to hyperfixate on things. My kids come by the ADHD very honest.
Yeah.
So I very specifically, I mean, I by my bed, I have my Kobo. The majority of what's on it is just like fantasy novels and stuff like that. She's got what she calls a junk food novel series that I've gotten into, and it's just reading for fun as well. And anything that I do, making sure that, hey, it's okay to have fun and it's okay to enjoy yourself in it and finding that balance there. Um, and I also really make sure that, I'm reaching out to my best friend. And I have a few other friends as well that like I have a support system that I make sure are always there.
Mhm.
Um, if I need to see my therapist, um, I can get in contact with her like that
Mhm.
and set up an appointment and make it happen. Um, and now I'm kind of getting a lot more stuff together. I'm looking at even physically, how can I start making things better? Because the downside is that when you're working as an electrician where you're like, oh yeah, like, I'm strong, I'm ripped, I'm feeling great.
Yeah.
And you go from that and eating the calorie intake for an electrician
Yeah.
coach, you being in a wheelchair, you kind of put on a little extra padding. So after gaining, I think it was like 50, 60 pounds, I'm like, oh, I need to do something about that. So that's kind of my next stage. Of that self-care is trying to figure out how can I put that in.
Hmm.
And also taking the biggest thing has been taking small moments of appreciation, not letting moments slip by. So, for instance, I've got a dog who she is 1 year old now, and she just has she's very loving and has moments where she'll bump my leg and I'm like what, and so I'm going to take this moment and I'm going to lie down on the floor with her and just interact with her because it's so easy to get caught up in so many different things. Or I'm going for a walk, or maybe I'm just walking over to drop something off at the library.
Hmm.
I see, you know, a tree and something about the colors just hit me, or some of the snow, the way the snow hits on it just hits me, and I stop and I look at it and appreciate the moment
Hmm.
because I find those are the things that mindset, that being mindful, being in the moment, not getting caught up in that rat race mentality, um, is something that I really was missing out on. And being able to accept that, being able to accept any, emotions that arise. Hey, I am feeling absolutely pissed off right now. Okay, 'cause that's how I'm feeling.
Hmm.
I'm feeling angry. Yeah. Okay. That's how I
Yeah.
feel, and accepting that. Um, so there's a lot of little pieces, and even while we're talking about this now, I'm still trying to fit together how this looks.
Yeah.
Um, because working on that mental health has been such a long-term thing for me in my recovery that finding the other elements has been um, a slow journey that I'm still learning.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. And I mean, to highlight the aspect of being in the present moment is so important, as you mentioned, because we lose sight of that quite often. And then when you go through something significant like you did, it brings up those moments that, oh, I've been just going through life without even being present. And that's such I think it's a harsh awakening when we have those moments, but also I think it's a moment to be grateful for, to have that realization and have the opportunity to even change it. So yeah, I completely agree. And then there's that aspect of when we're working on ourselves and doing that self-healing, we do stack our habits, right? We try one thing and then we continue to build on that. And that sounds like what you're doing. But when you were going through that experience, like you said, for the 2 years, what were the things that you were able to focus on to motivate yourself and get through that time? Or were there things from your past that you were able to draw upon, past experiences, past um, knowledge? Where were you able to get that resiliency from?
Hmm. A big part was fighting for my kids. Um,
Mhm.
it was pretty scary thinking I could never, or like when we thought it was MS and that maybe I had completely lost, my right leg, my right arm or whatever. Um, it was very scary thinking that I might not be able to pick up my kids anymore.
Mhm.
Um, when I got that diagnosis that this, I can manage this, um, that was fuel for me that, hey, I can fight to get better for my
Mhm.
kids. And I can fight to get better for the woman who I absolutely adore.
Mhm.
And she's everything to me.
Mhm.
Um, and even for, actually my best friend was one of the greatest supports for me and still is. I mean, I don't know what I did to deserve this back, but he helped out so much.
Mhm.
And he already has his own
Yeah.
issues to deal with. He's got muscular dystrophy and all that kind of stuff. And yet he was astounding. And so having him as kind of an outside support
Mhm.
was incredible.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a lot of the social side that really fueled me to keep getting better. And the people that would reach out to me and be like, "Hey, how have you been doing?"
Mhm.
Um, those were the strength the strengths that I leaned on in trying to fight and get through it.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I guess as a little aside, then you can't underestimate how powerful a little text message saying, "Hey, hope you're doing okay, thinking about you," can be.
Mhm.
Um, or just telling your friend you love them.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, guys sometimes get weird about that, but having your buddy being like, "Hey, hope you're okay. I love you." And you're just like, "Yeah, okay. I think I got this. I'm cared for,"
Yeah.
right? It's huge.
Mhm. And I guess so that fueled you, and was there anything you had from your past experiences that you were able to rely on, or just in that moment, just having knowing that there were people that were there for you and supporting you through this journey, that you were able to kind of get through it and push past all of it?
Yeah, you wouldn't let that one slip, would you? You had to round back to it. Try to avoid it. Um, you know, a big part of it from my past, um, part of the resiliency was also my mother had an obsessive compulsive disorder growing up, or a few other
Mm.
issues, um, where we're not on good terms right now. And in the recovery, especially after I found out that for some people, FND is mental health related, I was like, you know what? Whereas she refused to get help
Mm.
growing up, um, where I felt she chose her disorder over me, I am not doing that
Mm.
to my kids. I refuse to do that to my friends, to my wife, to the people I love. I will fight tooth and nail to not have others experience that. And so it was a very um, hard-headed resiliency, I
Yeah.
guess, where I'm like, I am not letting history repeat itself.
Mm.
I'm making a change, and I'm going to learn from the mistakes of those that came before me,
Yeah.
and not let a cycle go on. So it was just being stubborn. Really, it
Yeah.
was a big source of resiliency for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's relevant considering the course we just did on family systems and having that awareness of
Mm.
intergenerational trauma and putting an end to it. Did that kind of resonate for you when you were doing that first paper we had to write around patterns and bringing an end to it?
Oh my goodness. I swear when we talked about doing those genograms, which I had never heard
Yeah.
about what a genogram was, by the way, anybody listening, Google
Yeah.
genogram. Really cool. But anyway, doing that every single assignment, almost every single discussion post we did, I'm like, hey, genograms, 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 because it did so much for me to look back and be like, hey, that's kind of where I inherited some of this stuff. A lot of the social and generational
Mhm.
issues that came through and gave a bit more empathy towards, my parents and what they had gone through when I stopped and looked at that. But also looking and going, hey, look, here's also the protective supports I have around me now. Excuse me, with like my sister-in-law, for instance, who is a cornerstone for her. my wife and for myself and for my kids, because she is the greatest auntie in the world, or the coolest auntie as far as they're concerned.
Yeah.
Uh, so, that genogram really spelled out and confirmed kind of where I felt like I was at, in terms of challenges that I've had to face due to past generations, and also how I can support and help my kids as kind of the intermediary between a lot of that pain and those issues that have come before into my parents. And now I get to
Yeah.
choose what can be brought forward. It's kind of having that awareness alone was life changing for me. That's part of this degree, honestly, was
Yeah.
um, going through that genogram for me.
Yeah. And to your point, I've shared it with a lot of my friends too, to like look into it themselves on their own, or even if they want to work with their therapist. But to your point, it was so powerful. Like, I don't know about you, but that was probably the hardest paper I had to write. Not because it was long, it was fairly long, but at the same time, it's very triggering for me. And there was times where I had to step away and come back to it later just to kind of regulate myself, because, I've been going for therapy for a while, and I've dealt with some of those things on a subconscious level, or even directly, but going through that exercise and immersing myself in it was so profound and deep, but at the same time very powerful, just coming out of it. And to your point, having that additional empathy and compassion, not only for my parents, but their parents before, and all the things they had to experience and go through. It just opens up your eyes a little bit. And I'm super grateful for having that awareness. And now, going to visit my parents for the holidays, it's going to be, I'll show up as a different person. And yeah, it was a valuable exercise for me too. Um,
Mhm. It was huge. I was honestly shocked at how insightful it really was for me, because I thought like, "Oh, no, I know." And a lot of it I didn't know, but to actually see it laid out in front of me, especially with a lot of different colors and stuff that I had added, because I tend to be, a little bit more creative visual, um, really reinforced that, okay, um, first of all, that some of the stuff that's happened in my life, I can lighten up on some of the blame that I've placed,
yeah.
towards, those that have come before me.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, I don't have to, I also don't have to be like, well, whatever, it's okay, because I can now look at those lines that I've drawn and go, no, here's where I can choose to make it different, and protect my kids and my family and my own heart, to make sure that I don't need to be impacted by the challenges and trauma of previous generations, but understanding that, hey, this is why they behave a certain way, and this is why they have certain fears. I don't need to carry those fears. I can choose not to, because I understand where they're coming from. Um, so it kind of increases that empathy, while also making me more aware of maybe even triggers for me, with my kids, that, well, okay, this kind of thing used to set me off. Why? Well, okay, because I got that from my parents, and they got that because of their parents. Okay, maybe I don't need to get set off over this certain thing. What can I do to change it? Because obviously this isn't going to do my kids any good.
Mhm.
So it's, even using it in a very practical way has been helpful for me.
Yeah, yeah, and to your point, it's taking that responsibility to make those changes. Otherwise, as you mentioned earlier, you would be repeating those same patterns and dynamics, which ultimately led to the deterioration of your mental health, right? So
Yeah.
important to highlight that. And now, as you're kind of shifting into your career of becoming a therapist, starting your practicum with the hopes of being a full-time therapist. What are some things that you're keeping in mind and trying to keep within your awareness that you can share with future clients, considering your own personal experience and now having the skill set to be able to work with clients in that therapeutic aspect?
The biggest thing for me is that you don't need to change everything.
Mm,
Um, I'm very huge on acceptance, um, acceptance of your emotions, acceptance of what is. I'm very existential, so finding meaning in what there is today, and especially the notion of responsibility.
yeah,
That even if we choose not to act on something, that is still a choice, and that is still meaning. Um, Showing that to clients is something that I feel like can radically change your life. Um, so, for instance, somebody comes to me with, they're really struggling with a bunch of stuff that's happening in their life. Maybe stuff's going on with their family. And they're feeling, very anxious about it. Um, Working through that, yeah, of course you're feeling anxious about it. That's very
yeah,
normal. So you're not crazy. That's 100% normal. And secondly, okay, what are the things that we can do? And what are the things that we can't do? And what are the things that we're going to choose not to do?
mhm,
All of those things help create that meaning for your situation. You are the writer of your reality right now. And I know that sounds very ephemeral, very lofty, but really what it just comes down to is being able to accept that I am here right now. That's okay.
mhm,
Really, that's what it comes down to.
mm,
I can look at myself and my situation. And I love the line from my therapist that I have stolen and she's stolen from someone else. And hopefully more people will steal it, is that I'm going to look at myself and my situation with open curiosity and without any judgment,
mhm,
to teach that to people, um, and help them embrace the moment that they're in
yeah,
without the judgment of this is good, this is bad, but just what's happening
mhm,
is insanely life changing and has radically changed my life and is what helped me recover from my FND.
mhm,
Doesn't mean that mindset's going to help absolutely everybody and work for absolutely everybody, but being able to accept I'm feeling this, that's okay. I'm experiencing this. It sucks. It's horrible. I hate it, but it's okay that I am where I am because I still have choices I can make. Um, So even when you feel helpless and like you have no control, there are still things that you can choose and you can
yeah,
control. And I find that outrageously empowering for people.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, to your point, there's an aspect of agency that one can have by having that mindset that, this has happened, but I still have a choice here. And I think a lot of people give up that power or agency by just comparing their situation to others or just labeling things through judgment. You lose your ability to deal with it. And to your point, not accepting what is. You're constantly fighting it, resisting it, and you're just giving up your power. So that's so important to highlight. Do you feel like there's an aspect of overlap with, as you mentioned, you were a youth pastor? Any of those ideals, is there an overlap in terms of how you approach therapy as well?
With that, yeah, there probably is. Um, I mean, one of the biggest criticisms I had been given was that I was too focused on that kind of in the moment care, um, versus what they thought I should be encouraging and teaching. I wasn't quote unquote spiritually minded enough.
Mm,
And I always felt that the most spiritual thing is the here and now,
yeah.
is what we do, not um, what we have in our
Yeah.
heads, what we believe, you know? So I honestly think that part of the mindset that I have now has come from what I've used in working with teenagers and even with their families. Um, except I find it much easier in a situation where a lot of the religious nuances are removed and we can just talk about the here and now. It doesn't mean that, a person's spirituality or religious experience don't matter. No, 100% they do matter.
Mm,
Very important. But um it's probably much more targeted to where I found I resonated most in helping
yeah.
teens. And even now, I still talk with some of them, and their reflections go back to some of these very things that I've talked about towards the end here regarding that agency, that locus of control, and it's been so valuable to them. And I mean, I'm going to continue using that, especially now that I've been far more educated and had far more experience professionally now in my
Yeah.
trainings. So there's definitely a growth
Yeah.
out of there for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I wanna close off with one last question, I guess, in terms of one of the things I find very interesting and main themes of this podcast is the meaning that we derive from the situations we go through in life. And for yourself, going through what you went through, between 2018 and 2020, what's the meaning that you were able to draw from that entire experience?
Um, there is a whole lot of stuff that happens that is so outside of your control.
Mm,
We try to control so many parts of life and try to have all of our ducks in a row. You know what? Things can just fly off in the blink of an
yeah,
eye. You can't, I can't control a lot of stuff that happens with my
yeah,
body. Uh, I can't control a lot of stuff that happens. If I'm driving, I can't control other drivers. I couldn't control the time when my serpentine belt flew off of my vehicle. They didn't know it was going to happen. It just happened out of the blue. There was no indication. Um, you can't, there's a lot of stuff you can't control. But in the midst of all of it, um, there's something beautiful to be said about finding those precious moments in the middle of whatever you're going through.
mhm,
There is always a certain piece of hope and joy in the middle of whatever you're experiencing. You can find it, it's there. Whether it's with friends, whether it's with family, whether it's even within those brief moments of um, noticing something you wouldn't normally stop to notice.
mhm,
That mindfulness, that stopping and smelling the roses.
yeah,
I mean, really, that is the biggest thing out of it all that I kept going back to was what are the brief moments that I can just stop and take in to say, hey, I'm here. I'm still here. And although I can't control everything else around me, I could control that.
yeah,
I can control what focus I have right now. And I'm going to use that. That was kind of the biggest takeaway as I was going through the middle of all of that
yeah,
experience.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's powerful, and thank you for all that, and Terry, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing so much. I know I pushed you a little bit there, but thank you for staying with it, and I appreciate it all. And for listeners, typically I offer guests an opportunity to share ways that they can be reached. Completely up to you if you want to share any socials or anything. If not, that's all good too. But I just want to give you that opportunity there.
Yeah. Most of my socials have been deleted recently as I've been pulling back
Yeah.
um, from from social media and all of that. But one of the places that I can be reached, if people are interested, um, is through the medical Mastodon. If anybody's used Mastodon, um, given all that's kind of happened with Twitter lately, and Terry J. Stroud at med-mastodon.com. And I mean, shoot me a follow, a message, comes up on my phone, um, intentionally on the med mastodon as more of a professional
Mm.
side of things to keep equipping myself, and less about just kind of the goofy interactions that I usually want to have about games or geeky stuff, crochet, whatever. So yeah, if someone wants to reach out or need to chat or whatever, or just say hi, you can definitely find me on there for sure.
Sounds good. I'll definitely share that in the show notes. But Terry, thank you again for coming on here. I appreciate you taking the time, and I wish you a great holiday break with your family. But yeah, hope to continue to stay in touch.
Yeah, I definitely hope so. This has been really cool to do. So I appreciate you having me on here.
Thank you for checking out this episode with Terry. As always, please leave a 5-star review. And until next week.